My thanks again for you to join us today, and let us dive right into the next slide. Firstly, is to outline just the preparations that are ongoing between COP 4.1 and 4.2. This slide is going to become very familiar to you today and also in the next days. And for you to know here is that in February, 2 online forums will open, one of which we will introduce in greater detail today. But also to point out that there will be an information session on national reporting and compliance, one of the items we will speak about today, and another on financial mechanism, the other item. And so there'll be more time even on those documents to be prepared and to ask more questions. Moving to the next slide. Firstly, just to outline again, the overall approach to COP is known to all of you very well. It is a 5-day meeting, and we shall be concentrating on the plenary sessions mostly in terms of how these documents will be placed and for consideration by the COP. So to the next slide. Today, we will look at all of the topics that we have planned for it as part of the tentative schedule of work for Tuesday, the 22nd of March. That is the first group of documents related to the financial mechanism. I beg your pardon, the first group of documents related to national reporting and compliance. The second set of documents related to the financial mechanism. And thirdly, the topics that are going to tentatively set to be introduced on Tuesday afternoon, namely various technical items, as we shall detail a bit later today. With that, to the next slide, and just to reiterate that the tentative schedule of work is designed in such a way so that there is a priority time spent in plenary to consider and adopt and deliberate as much as possible in plenary time, of course, but provision is also made for smaller groups, always keeping in mind that only one group may work alongside the plenary, or once plenary has been adjourned, that 2 groups could be working next to each other. And lastly, also to make the important point that all substantive items that, especially if they may have budgetary implications, would need to be completed well in time for the program of work and budget group to be able to consider the elements as they will be convening from Wednesday onwards for the adoption of the budget by Friday. And also, and we shall detail more later, for credentials, it is very important to keep the deadline in mind for the credentials, as the credentials report is set to be adopted in the plenary on Thursday morning. With that, let us move along, and just to highlight here again, the documents that we will be looking at today, firstly on national reporting, secondly on financial resources and mechanism, and then technical items. And we will also have, hopefully, a little bit of time left for some logistical information and other Q&A related to that. If you have not yet located our documents, or you'd like to just be reminded, please find the working documents and as well as the information documents and other documents on our website. And as you may know, of course, they have almost all of them been available since the 20th of September. Next slide. And we shall start with the financial resources and mechanism documentation. Firstly, you will find that there are 3 documents prepared. 4.9, which is the update on the Global Environmental Facility. Add 1 contains the executive summary of the report from the Council of the GEF, and Inf 7 contains the entire report. Just to reiterate, of course, that the Secretariat has always provided its own update of this part of the financial mechanism to the COP, but this part of the update is very much done in collaboration and close collaboration with the GEF Secretariat. The update provides information on the work of the Financial Trust, but also recounts, of course, that the GEF operates under the guidance of the COP that is set out in Decision 1.5, as well as the MOU that was concluded between the GEF and the Minamata Convention. May I also just draw your attention to the time frame of this report, namely from July 2019 all the way through June 2021. It covers all items, including responsiveness to the guidance, evaluations relevant to the portfolio, and cooperation between the Secretariat and the GEF Secretariat. Moving to the next slide, and another topic, which of course 4.1 already looked at, but here to say that the Secretariat also provided for the deliberations of the parties document 410, which is on the 8th replenishment of the GEF Trust Fund, to which we will also be adding an addenda, which will come out shortly, namely an update, a further update to the replenishment process that is currently underway. And please also have a look at Inf 8, which provides much of the program directions and strategic positioning framework as drafted in the GEF context for the deliberations of the 8th replenishment. May I just recall here that, of course, once concluded, GEF 8 will begin disbursement and its activities in July of 2022, and it would be a 4-year cycle that runs until June 26. The replenishments discussions are currently still very much underway. In fact, this entire week sees discussions to this end. And it is expected that the replenishment discussions will be concluding very soon, and that those will be taking up at the assembly, which is set for the middle of this year. And just to recall that, of course, we already opened this particular agenda item during COP 4.1, and that was to allow parties to reflect on the replenishment, to reflect on the information provided, and also to be able to make their views known on the replenishment and any reflections they had. This was done during COP 4.1, and if you would wish to recall the discussion there and the reflections and comments by many parties, I'd like to refer you to the meeting report of COP 4.1, which is document 428, where all of this is detailed. And let me also assure you that as requested, all the statements by parties were firstly not only heard by the GEF CEO who joined us during 4.1 or much of the sessions of 4.1 on this item, but were also directly forwarded to the CEO and the Council by the Secretariat. May I also introduce to you, or just recall again, that the information in Inf 8 is moving information as the discussions in the replenishment are unfolding. But should you want to know the most recent or any additional documentations that are being made available by the GEF Secretariat, we would like to invite you to go to the GEF website, under whose auspices, of course, the entire replenishment process is being managed. With that, I'd like to move to the next slide. And just briefly pause and check in our virtual room if there might be any questions that have come in the chat on the documents I have presented so far. Please record any queries or questions you might have here in the chat, and we shall try to endeavor to answer them either as we're presenting or as we come to such an info stop. But let me just recall here that on the one hand, under the GEF article, there is the regular report that the GEF Council makes to the COP, and that is the information presented in document 4.9. And thereafter, there's also the special time now to be looking at the GEF 8 replenishment. So again, that is all the information in document 4.10. And with all of that, and as the replenishment is ongoing under the auspices of the GEF, and in fact currently undergoing, parties may wish to make use of the information presented in the Secretariat documents in the context of national processes relevant to the GEF replenishment. With that, and I do not see any questions appearing, just to recall that we will, of course, have another opportunity to go deeper into any of this at the end of the month, should any more questions, especially vis-à-vis Jeff, come forward. If I don't see any questions, or we could continue on to the other part of the financial mechanism, namely the specific international program. And firstly, just like with Jeff, also the specific international program makes an annual regular report to the COP. And this is contained also within the Secretariat's regular report on that part of the international, beg your pardon, of the financial mechanism. So overall, for the SIP, we have 3 documents. Firstly, 411, which is the document by the Secretariat on the overall work of the SIP. This is augmented by Addendum 1, which is the report by the Governing Board of the SIP in terms of all the activities between COP-3 and now COP-4. And also we have another document which I will stop at for a moment, which is a document where the Executive Director of UNEP was invited to report on the strengthening of the SIP. That is document 413. But firstly, let me introduce to you briefly document 411, which is the overall report. And as set out on the slide, it has a number of sections that firstly describe the support provided by the Secretariat, the outline of the Governing Board, the overview of the most recent round of applications, and then also information, financial and other relevant information on the specific trust fund from which the SIP operates. In the infograph that you see here, you will of course see the overall summary that you can read in more detail in these reports. But we have of course completed 3 rounds of applications to the SIP. First round in 2018, second round in 2019, and then the third round was conducted between 2020 and 2021. That means in total now there are 24 projects under the SIP, supported by the voluntary contributions by a number of donors. Let me go to the next slide. Thank you very much. And just to introduce here exactly what you will find in Addenda 1, which is the report by the Governing Board of the specific international program and its 2 meetings. Annex 1 is its 5th meeting that was held in November 2020, and that was the meeting that launched the round and also gave additional guidance on the round. And then Annex 2 contains the 6th meeting, and the 6th meeting was the meeting at which 24 applications were considered in detail over 3 days, over more days in fact. And of these, 9 were approved for a funding envelope of 2.2 million. Let me go to the next slide. And here, just to outline the document 413. This document is the Executive Director's report, and it comes from a mandate that was expressed by the COP at the conclusion of COP-3 to look into options to strengthen the specific international program to support capacity building and technical assistance. This report contains a number of sections, as you can see here, in fact, 4 sections and also 2 appendices. It is in fact perhaps the most comprehensive report so far there is on the SIP, as it looks longitudinally at all of the information already collated on the SIP, but also at the origins of the SIP and why the convention placed the SIP into the convention text. We would therefore like to very much encourage you to have a look at this document, also in conjunction with all of the other official documents to the SIP. And to give you a flavor, the next slide shows you, and it's all captured in this report, the role and place of the SIP vis-à-vis the other parts of the funding mechanism or the other part of the funding mechanism. Of course, the GEF portfolio of Mercury is much, much bigger than this graph shows. SIP is a rather small grant-making mechanism, but the two together form the official financial mechanism. There's also a related fund called the Special Fund, but this is for institutional strengthening, and the items it funds are completely distinct from those that the SIP funds. In another slide, here I'd like to also express the Secretariat's very big gratitude to the very, very generous donations by our funders over the 3 rounds. Here you can see projected not only the total money that has been raised for the SIP, but also the donors to the SIP, with the largest donor being Norway, followed by Switzerland, but not to say in any way that the other donations are not incredibly important to the implementation of this very important but small program. Let me also recognize that France, for example, was a first-time donor in our last round, and so we are very, very happy to have had additional funders coming forward for the 3rd round. Let me also draw your attention to the observations or recommendations that came forward through the Executive Director's report, and they are detailed here, but you can find them, of course, in the report. But it is to reiterate the value of the SIP, to make use of all the features of the SIP, especially in its first decade, and also to call for an increased level of funding and continued funding for the SIP. And that is both in terms of financial resources and in-kind contributions. And may I just here record the Secretariat's specific thanks to the government of Italy for having given in-kind contribution of a staff member. So we're very, very happy to have a staff member for 2 years as an in-kind contribution from the government of Italy. Moving to the next slide, and just as an information stop, so just to reiterate, as for every COP at this COP, the regular report of the SIP Governing Board is put forward to the COP, and that this report covers, of course, all of the time between COP-3 and COP-4, that is 2019 to 2021. And also to draw your attention to the Executive Director's report and the suggested action put forward in the Executive Director's report. With that, just to check if there are any specific questions to these documents, again mentioning that we will have a deep dive session on the financial mechanism at the end of the month. So let me pause for a moment to see if there are some questions. And I think I see one about the current status of fundraising for the next round of the SIP. We are very eagerly awaiting, of course, hope that we will have again a robust replenishment of the SIP so that we could enable the governing board, the next governing board that will be confirmed by COP-4 to launch a new round, a 4th round. And once that is in place, the 4th round would be open for all eligible parties. At this stage, I can inform that we have already received pledges from 2 countries, namely Denmark and Norway. I would have to check the amounts. I do not have them currently with me, but we have already received pledges from Norway and Denmark and hope to have many more in the coming weeks and months for the SIP. With that, if there are no further questions, I would like to draw your attention to another part of the deliberations on the financial mechanism, and that is the review of the financial mechanism. And for this, document 412 has been prepared. The document includes a draft decision in its first annex and also a draft terms of reference in its second annex. and to recall that according to the article, the financial mechanism shall be reviewed on a regular basis and is particularly to look at the level of funding, its guidance, effectiveness, and its ability to address the changing needs of eligible parties. The first review took place at COP-3, and it was at COP-3 that the request was made to the Secretariat to prepare a draft terms of reference that could be considered at COP-4. And this is what this document is about. It provides information as background for your consideration in the consideration of terms of reference for the financial mechanism. In this, it is of course recognized that the financial mechanism consists of both the GEF on the one hand and the SIP on the other, and it would be a review of both entities that comprise the Convention's financial mechanism. Let me go to the next slide. And before asking if there are any specific questions on this, and again recalling that there will be more time on the 24th of February to go deeper, just to say there is a draft decision in this document for review and consideration by the parties, as well as the draft terms of reference. And these, if passed, these terms of reference would be able to be actioned and allow the Secretariat to put in place all of the necessary items for the second review to be done, and the COP would also have to advise and decide on the timing of the review. With that, I want to stop for a moment to see if there are any questions on the financial review of the mechanism and/or any of the preceding documents that all form part of aspects of the financial mechanism. I don't believe I see any. If any arise later, please feel free to add them. But with that, we can move to the next item. And here we will begin to put forward the information on national reporting. May I just introduce that we will speak firstly on national reporting. My colleague Richard Gutierrez will present that work. We will then present briefly on the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and we will then return to a second part of national reporting. With that, please, Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Good day and good evening, everyone. On item 4H, national reporting, we have document 416 entitled National Reporting. Now, the document provides the Secretariat's report on the first short reports, the responses therein to the questions, as well as the feedback received from the parties on parts C, D, and E, as mandated under Article 21 of the Convention on Reporting. The document also has the overall comments by the Secretariat on the responses in the first short reports. The document should be read in conjunction with Inf 2, information provided by the parties to the Minamata Convention. The document and Inf 2 elaborates on the reporting performance in the first short reports, covering the reporting period 16 August 2017 to 31 December 2019. As you will also note in the slide, an 89% reporting rate was attained at the deadline of 30/06/2021. Next slide, please. Thank you. Continuing on, the 4 questions covered in the short report relate to supply, trade, and disposal of mercury, and in particular to Article 3, mercury supply sources and trade, and Article 11, mercury waste under the Convention. Question 3.1c is on primary mercury mines, operating at the time of the entry into force of the Convention for the party. Question 3.3a on individual stocks of mercury or mercury compounds exceeding 50 metric tons and sources of mercury supply generating stocks exceeding 10 metric tons per year. Question 3.5 relates to the export of mercury from the from the party's territory during the reporting period. And question 11.2 relates to the facilities for final disposal of waste consisting of mercury and mercury compounds in the party's territory. Next slide, please. Document 416 contains an annex, particularly Annex 1 and Annex 2. Here I will describe Annex 2, which presents the details of the responses to each of the 4 questions of the first short national reports received during the reporting period. Below, you will note a graph showing the responses to question 3.1 on primary mercury mines. You will note that 2 parties responded yes. Oh, sorry. 2 parties responded yes, and 100 parties responded no. I'm sorry about that. There seems to be a mix-up on the colors there. But moving on to question 3.3, you will note here that 57 parties responded yes to that they, 45 parties responded yes to making an endeavor, and 57 parties responded no. Of the 45, 22 attached their sources. Then other 8 parties responded with other data, and then 5 no submission. Next slide, please. Now here you will see an overall graph of the responses on question 3.5, wherein 94 parties responded no, that they have not received consent or relied on any general notification of consent in accordance with Article 3. 8 parties answered yes to export to parties or to non-parties. Of these 8 parties, 7 responded yes to exports to parties, and then 5 responded yes to export to non-parties. At the bottom of the slide, on question 11.2, 20 parties responded yes to having a final disposal facility, while 75 parties responded no, and 2 parties responded that they do not know. Next slide, please. So on the next slide, you will note that the Secretariat observed that the wordings of some questions resulted in a lack of clarity in the responses. As a consequence, possibilities for longer-term tracking and meaningful analysis of the responses are limited. It would be desirable for these issues to be addressed by the COP, particularly question 3.1, the basis for reporting the total amount and whether it is total amount of mercury obtained, or the total amount of ore containing mercury that is extracted. In question 3.3, whether the obligation to endeavor to identify stocks and sources is a one-off or continual or ongoing effort. In question 3.5, the need to give parties the possibility to indicate in the format that they did not export mercury. And lastly, in question 11.2, the need for greater clarity regarding the term final disposal. I end my presentation there and hand the mic back over to Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. As the reports that have come in 2019 are very much closely linked to the work of the Implementation and Compliance Committee, and were in fact also presented as part of a separate report to the Implementation and Compliance Committee as part of its regular work between COP-3 and COP-4, I would like to invite my colleague Lara Ognibene to introduce to you at this section the work of the Implementation and Compliance Committee and document 15. Over to you, Lara.
Thank you, Claudia. So, good day, everyone. My name is Lara Ognibene. I serve with the Secretariat. I would like to introduce to you document 4/15 titled Report of the Work of the Implementation and Compliance Committee of the Minamata Convention on Mercury, which will be addressed on the agenda. So in the document, you will see that the document met online on 7th and 8th June last year. And the report of the meeting is included in the annex to the document. During the meeting, the ICC for the first time examined issues related to the implementation of and compliance with provisions of the Convention based on the short national reports submitted by parties in accordance with Article 21. Just now. The ICC commended that 97 out of 114 parties had submitted their reports at the time, which was a 85% reporting rate. During the meeting, the Secretariat presented to the committee its findings on the responses submitted by parties to the 4 questions of the short reports, so the 3 questions related to Article 3, and the 1 question related to Article 11, as explained by Richard earlier. Based on the report of the Secretariat, the committee's deliberations, the committee agreed on recommendations to COP-4. The committee also considered during the meeting issues related to its work program between COP-4 and COP-5 and the venue and the date of the next meetings of the committee. So ICC-4, which will be held online in July this year, and ICC-5, which will be held in person in March over 2 days. And finally, during the meeting, the committee also elected a new chair, Ms. Paulina Riquelme from Chile, and a new vice chair and rapporteur, Ms. Itsuki Kuroda from Japan, who will serve between the closure of ICC-3, so the next, the meeting of the committee that ended in June last year, and the closure of ICC-4, which would be in July this year. And next slide, please. Here you will see on the right-hand side of the slide the recommendations that I mentioned earlier that the committee has agreed to be sent to COP-4 for consideration. They're included in the same document, 4/15 in the appendix. And in particular, it's relevant to mention with respect to the recommendations that the committee concluded that the following factors might have contributed to reporting challenges, which are identified in the recommendations, in particular in the letter E and D of the recommendation. And these reporting challenges relate to first interpretation of certain reporting requirements, which varied. Secondly, reporting on measures underway at the time of the reporting was also a challenge. Thirdly, some documentation did not reach the Secretariat for various reasons, including parties' concerns regarding the protection of commercial in confidence information. And also, finally, this was the first experience for all parties in reporting on their obligations. So that was obviously also an additional challenge. I will stop here and I remain available for questions at the end of this session, and I hand over back to my colleague Claudia for the second part of the national report presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So going right ahead with the next slide. You will also recall, and maybe this is one of the documents best known by our parties, that at COP-3, the COP requested the Secretariat to work on draft reporting guidance to complete the national reporting format. The Secretariat worked on these draft guidance, and by the instruction of the decision 313 made the draft guidance available to comment earlier in 2021. We were very happy to receive a large number of and very substantive comments and very considered comments back to make the draft guidance hopefully even more useful and helpful to countries. All of the documents, all the comments received were incorporated as much as possible, and the draft guidance was published as document 417, as you see here, and already for use by parties to complete their full reports, which were in fact required by the end of last year, December 2021. In other words, the draft reporting guidance has already been used now as much as parties could for their first full reporting cycle. As I would like to just point out, had the in-person meeting of COP taken place in November of last year, the COP would have been able to look at the draft guidance ahead of the deadline for full reports. However, since this part of the considerations has been postponed until March of this year, the COP has not had a chance to look at the draft reporting guidance yet, and such the meeting in March will be the first time for the COP to look at this, but also with the view of including and reflecting on the experiences by parties in the full reporting cycle that many parties reported on by end of last year. So this is just to bring this document formally to your attention for the preparations of March, but having noted that many parties are already very familiar with this document. And may I go to the next slide and just point out that in the document on the draft reporting guidance, besides a front section of explanations, there is also and the actual reporting guidance, there is also a note from the Secretariat that in drafting the reporting guidance and in the lessons learned from the first short reports, and also as seen from the work of the ICC, there were some questions that require some clarification, or parties would possibly benefit from some clarification for some questions, and I've highlighted them for you here, namely question 3.1, question 3.3, and question 3.5. These are probably not very difficult fixes and possibly more smaller fixes. There may also be other more detailed considerations that parties may want to bring forward on the guidance, but for your consideration or first information here, the Secretariat had noted that these three questions are not uniformly answered by parties in the short reports, and so we foresee that perhaps there may also be challenges on these questions for the full reports and the future as well. In other words, these are perhaps matters that clarity would be good to strengthen the draft reporting guidance for use by parties. And with that, I go to the info stop and hope to look into the virtual room to see if there are any specific questions related to this bundle of documents. Just to paraphrase, Richard presented the outcome of the short reports. In other words, the Secretariat's report on the short reports received for those reports due by December 2019. We have a very strong reporting rate and very much invaluable information came together. However, there were also some observations as outlined by Richard on some items that would require clarification for future. And there are some items mentioned in this regard, and in this way I'd like to refer to you also to Annex 1, which contains the draft decision, including not only to recognize the high reporting rate and to encourage parties to again report in good, robust numbers, but also to provide some clarity on some items that were either noted by the Secretariat or through the considerations of the ICC. Lara outlined document 415, where you will find the comments specifically by the ICC and the reflections from the ICC on some items that needed perhaps more clarification from the from the COP. In particular, she mentioned, of course, the trade reports, some of which have not reached the trade forms, some of which have not reached the Secretariat as part of national reporting. And lastly, may I just recall that there is also under this general topic of implementation review and compliance, the draft guidance for national reporting. Firstly, the COP may consider the items laid out in paragraph 9 of document 417 because these may require as clarification sooner to be able to help on the next round of reporting. And then also the COP may consider the way forward on the draft guidance, especially also considering the lessons learned now from this first round of full reports. With that, if I could look into the room to see if there are any specific questions, but again, also to highlight here that we have set some time aside for a deep dive into both the short reports, the outcomes, but also specifically the questions needed for clarification, etc. And that will happen on Wednesday, the 23rd of February. So looking at the virtual room, I see a question of the compilation of the full reports. Let me just outline that, of course, the full reports were due at the end of last year. We have already received many, many, many reports and are in the process all of January to check all reports for completeness. As soon as they are confirmed as being complete, we count them as a complete report. As you can imagine, with these very many reports, and each of our parties have reported on 43 questions, some of which are multiple levels. This completion check, which is the first stage check, is taking a bit of time, but we are doing that in the months of January and February. Thereafter, we will also begin the deep dive on the information that is contained in those reports. And then the regular process is used on these reports. And so in terms of timeline, the report of and compilation of the outcomes of the full reports would be due by the next COP. In other words, the Secretariat would work on this work for COP-5. But in the interim, the next ICC meeting would receive the first report from the Secretariat on the findings and the responses received and the findings in these first reports. So as first consideration, the ICC would consider it, and then it would be COP-5 that would be looking at the compilation of full reports, as well as any observations, recommendations, and review from the ICC on that matter. So while we hope to be able to show you soon some numbers on the full reports, and we hope to come close to the high rate of reporting that we have seen in the short reports, we can't yet share the compilation, as that will take has a number of steps as per convention process. I hope that's clarified. Okay. Is there any other specific question? Noting, of course, that should another question arise as you peruse these documents, please simply bring them with on the session of the 23rd, or ask us during regional meetings or directly, and we shall be happy to oblige to try to help. With that, I would like to proceed to the next set, and I would like to ask my colleague Esaku Toda to outline our novel step forward in terms of an online technical document forum for technical documents that will be considered according to the tentative work schedule of work on Tuesday afternoon of the COP. Esaku, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm going to present on the some technical agenda items, and I would like to start with the presentation on the online technical document forum that we are going to launch to assist COP to agree on some technical documents without being bogged down into technical discussions at COP 4.2 in Bali with limited size of the party delegations. And we are going to set up a forum modeled on the online budget forum before COP 4.1 on the 4 documents that are listed here. The first is the document on customs code, and the next two are the ASGM National Action Plan guidance document. The second, the annex one is the health chapters, and the annex two is the about the management of ASGM tailings. The fourth one is the draft guidance document on the inventory of releases under Article 9. So this is for the parties to review the documents and communicate any possible remaining technical comments and questions through the forum in advance of COP 4.2. We expect that this will help resolving any technical issues so that these documents are adopted or agreed for use at COP. This builds on the good experience of the budget forum. The forum will be opened on the 14th of February and remain active until 11th of March. The Secretariat will provide responses to the comments and questions posted in the forum. The forum is linked to COP 4.2 registration. Each delegation members nominated through COP 4.2 pre-registration platform receive unique link to access the forum, and heads and alternate heads will have access to post questions and comments. Other members and also observers will have can navigate through the forum, but cannot post questions and comments. And one difference between the online budget forum was that observers also has access. And if any parties would like to involve other experts who are not registered for COP 4.2, please just contact the Secretariat to add that expert. So this is about the technical forum, and then I would like to jump into the presentation of some technical documents. So next slide, please. And the first one is the customs codes, and the COP2 considered a proposal from a number of parties to develop draft customs codes for the Mercury added products covered in Annex A in order to facilitate the implementation of the convention, improve national reporting, and foster better communication among trading partners. A document was submitted to COP3 explaining the process for developing the 6 digits HS or harmonized system codes, which is this is a bit small, but it is explained in the figure on the left. And basically, the 6 digits codes is internationally harmonized through the World Customs Organization, and the codes more than 6 digits are under the control of each country. So COP3 further considered this matter, and decision MC3/3 requested the Secretariat, in collaboration with the Global Mercury Partnership and involving relevant experts, to draft a guidance document and provide an assessment about the 6 digits code. Next slide, please. So what does we worked on the guidance document, and it is presented as document 4/2027, and this table explains what the guidance document says in response to the mandates given from the Secretary from COP3. The first one about the a list of possible customers codes of more than 6 digits. The document contains a list extending over several pages. And secondly, the examples of codes more than 6 digits for products not listed in Annex A. We compiled examples from Argentina, Canada, China, European Union, Jamaica, Mexico, Uruguay, and Vietnam, and it is which is included in the INF5 document. And the good practice of using or customs codes or supplementing the customs codes, the report gives an example of the European Union where their CN code, which is combined nomenclature code, is accompanied by information on legal requirements. Customs could request such information on an ad hoc basis. With regard to the assessment of usefulness of 6-digit code, the report says that yes, it is useful, but it takes time. The earliest possible year to develop such WTO process is 2027, and also trade in products listed in Annex A will be very limited. Next slide, please. So perhaps I would stop here, and the action invited from the conference party is to use to invite parties to use the guidance, and COP may request the Secretariat to keep the guidance under review and support parties and cooperate with partners in supporting its use. Thank you.
Thanks, Esako. Yes, indeed, we just built in a small info stop. And as Esako outlined, this guidance has been prepared and parties are invited to use it. And as Esako further identified, the COP may also wish to request the Secretariat to keep the guidance and its use under review and to cooperate with the partnership in supporting its use. With that, recognizing that there are some questions emerging on some other items, I'm looking at the chat, and if I'm not referring to your question now, please don't worry, I will pick it up, but I would like to pick up a question related to this document. So Esako, how will customs codes of newly included products be addressed or could be addressed? Could you speak to that question? It comes from Agustin Arte of Argentina.
I think there are two things. One is whether or not the COP request the example of possible customs codes beyond 6 digits after products are added to Annex A, and it would be for the COP to decide. And with regard to the 6-digit code, that argument is also included in the report, saying that if our COP agrees to add any products, then it would take another 5 or 6 years to develop a 6-digit code. Thank you.
Agustin, I hope that goes some way towards your question. It really also relates, of course, just to the complexity of the 6-digit code. But if you would need something further, either please feel free to elaborate in the chat or contact Esako directly afterwards. If I see no other questions related to the customs code documentation, I do see that there's a question related to waste documents. So Esako, you may want to pick that up later on when we go to waste. And I see another one on national reports, but I'll return to that a little bit later. With that, Esako, if I may invite you because I do not see any other questions right now on customs code, to go to the next set of the next agenda item, which is that on artisanal and small-scale gold mining, please.
Thank you. So I will move forward and I will handle the waste questions when I will present the waste document. So the second technical document is the NAP guidance, ASGM NAP guidance document, and the parties that have ASGM within their territory shall take steps to reduce or eliminate the use, emission, and releases of mercury. If parties notify the Secretariat that ASGM is in their territory is more than insignificant, they shall develop and implement a national action plan and submit NAP to the Secretariat in no later than 3 years and review the progress every 3 years, and include such review in Article 21 reporting. So far, we have received, I think this number needs to be corrected. This should be 36 or 30. I would like to refer to the INF document, document INF2 that Richard spoke to, which compiles the notifications and communications received by the Secretariat in relation to the implementation of the convention, and in that document it says 35 and 15 NAPs as of the publication of that document. I will correct this slide later. And next slide, please. So on ASGM, we have one specific proposed action by the COP, which is about the NAP guidance document 4/6. COP1 considered the guidance on the preparation of NAPs and agreed to its use by the parties. The COP decision 3/3, which was on mercury waste, requested the Secretariat to work on improving the NAP guidance regarding the management of ASGM tailings in cooperation with the Global Mercury Partnership. The Secretariat worked with the partnership to develop a guidance document on the management of ASGM tailings, which is INF6, and included its summary as a draft annex to the NAP guidance document, which is Annex 2 to document 4/9, 4/6. And also the NAP guidance document, the original one, also indicated that WHO was developing the recommendations on matters related to public health for future update of the guidance. WHO provided an update to relevant sections as can be found in Annex 1 to document 4/6. Next, going to next slide. So this is a kind of a essence of the guidance document on the management of ASGM tailings. Firstly, of course, it is important to minimize mercury in tailings. And what it says is that if you don't process the tailings for gold recovery, that the tailings should go to the final disposal, of course, preventing the releases of mercury. And one complication of ASGM tailings is that it may include gold, and it will go. It may then go to the gold recovery, and we have to note that cyanidation of mercury contaminated tailings is the worst one of the worst practice to be phased out in accordance with Annex C of to the convention. So what the guidance says is that if you reprocess it and if it contains mercury, recover mercury before reprocessing. Perhaps this is the essence of the guidance document, and of course it is full of technical information advice. And next slide, please. And this is in post-op. So the COP may wish to adopt the revised guidance and agree to its use by parties, and also the COP may request the Secretariat to cooperate with the partnership to support its use. Thank you very much.
Okay, so at the risk of repeating the info stop, this guidance has been revised as requested, and the guidance document very clearly shows the items that have been revised, whether through the partnership information or through the WHO. So this is clearly laid out in those documents for you. May I look into the chat if there is a specific question on ASGM guidance? It is easiest if you can record your question in the chat if possible. I recognize a hand up from Joe Moss from the United Kingdom. Would you like to take the floor, please?
I think I did that by accident. No question from me. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. If there is another question that comes to mind, or if you would like some clarification on this, just to summarize this guidance and also the previous ones, much work has gone into it, both by the Secretariat and the partnership and others. And so, of course, even the partnership the respective colleagues from the partnerships would be available for information if you would like to catch up on any specific items, whether it was customs code or ASGM. But if there's no specific question on ASGM and everything was hopefully sufficiently clear, I would like to suggest we move on to make good use of time, as we have two more technical topics, and the first is releases. Over to you, Esako.
Thank you. And moving on, I would like to present the documents 4/7 on releases. And Article 9 defines relevant source as significant anthropogenic point source of releases as identified by a party, and that is not addressed in other provisions of this convention. And each party are supposed to identify relevant sources, take measures, and establish an inventory. And the Article 9 also says that the COP shall adopt guidance on BAT-BEP, best available techniques and best available practice, and on inventories of releases. For your information, for Article 8 emissions, these pieces of guidance has already adopted at COP-1. So decision MC/3/4 requested group of experts established by COP2 to produce a report including draft guidance on inventories, proposed categories of point sources, roadmap for developing guidance on BAT-BEP. The expert group developed the report through 13 online meetings. Next slide, please. So this is what the group developed. What you see on the left is the list of potentially relevant point source categories, and the expert group spent much time to review literature on where releases are reported from such sources. And it should be noted that it is for the party to decide which sources are relevant. And on the right-hand side, you see the structure of the inventory guidance, which is quite much modeled on the Annex 8, Article 8 emissions inventory guidance, and which refers to, for example, the system like PRTR or the UNEP Mercury inventory toolkit. And please note that if there's any technical comments, we can clear these comments through the online technical document forum. And next slide is about the roadmap of the BAT-BEP guidance document. And since this is a plan and not a technical document per se, this is not exactly a issue for the online technical document forum. This is for this process is for COP-4.2 to decide. But of course, if you have any questions, please just contact the secretariat. We can respond to any questions. So next slide is, I think this is info stop. So just to remind you that the COP is invited to adopt the guidance, inventory guidance, and agree on the roadmap. Thank you.
And just to augment is, of course, that there is a draft decision as part of the documentation, and that draft decision would include whichever roadmap it is that the COP decides on, and also to augment that the technical online document forum would be able to be a very, very good place for as much information or clarifications to come forward, or items, so because items you as a party might have, another party may have the exact same item it wishes to make some more clarifications on. And all of this is supposed to enable best preparation by parties and to make use of this time that we have in the unusual circumstance between COP 4.1 and COP 4.2. With that, I'm looking into the virtual room to see if there are any questions for ESAKU on releases, whether it is with regards to the draft guidance on the inventory or the proposed way forward on drafting the BAT-BEP guidance. I don't see any specific questions coming up. That may mean that everything is clear, but if something is not, please either use the online forum and or reach out to ESAKU directly. So with that, we're moving to the next, a rather important topic as well, of course, under technical matters. ESAKU, could you take us through the documents on waste, please?
Thank you, Claudia. So the last technical document is the document on mercury waste, and I'm going to speak to document 4/8, which is a report of the expert group, and INF 27 is a report on the technical supplement to the report. INF 24 is the guidance document being developed under Basel Convention, which is also referred to in Article 11 of the Convention. So under Article 11, the parties have obligation to manage mercury waste in an environmentally sound manner, and the definition of mercury waste is provided for in the article, and it defines mercury waste as substance or objects consisting of mercury or mercury compounds, which is category A, we call, and category B containing mercury or mercury compounds, or category C, contaminated with mercury or mercury compounds in a quantity above the relevant thresholds defined by COP that are disposed of, are intended to be disposed of, or are required to be disposed of. And this, it also further says that this definition excludes overburden, waste rock, and tailings from mining, except from primary mercury mining, unless they contain mercury or mercury compounds above thresholds defined by COP. So COP decision MC/5 by COP3 provided definitions for category A waste, which is basically mercury or mercury compounds themselves listed in that decision. And category C is basically an end-of-life mercury products. So, so the same decision requested the expert group to work on the remaining threshold, which is about the category C and mining waste. And for mining waste, the COP-3 concluded that for now, overburden waste rock, we don't need to worry about it. And the COP requested the group to work on the tailings. Next slide, please. So the expert group, co-chaired by Nigeria and Switzerland, had 11 online meetings, and their agreements and some issues for further consideration. Firstly, in terms of the approaches, agreed that an approach to establish a threshold based on total concentration of mercury in waste is currently the most appropriate for category C waste, noting that it is not going to define hazardous waste. It is to define mercury waste under the Minamata Convention. But the group could not reach consensus on thresholds for category C waste. I will talk to this later. And thirdly, agreed that ASGM tailings were addressed by Article 7 and that there was currently no need for a threshold on ASGM tailings under Article 11. And fourthly, with regard to the mine tailings, which the group proposed two-tier threshold for mine tailings. Tier 1, total content, 25 milligram per kilogram, and Tier 2, 0.15 milligram per liter, using an appropriate leaching test. And the technical description or explanation is included in INF 27. Next slide, please. So, what are the issues for COP guidance? There are two options listed there. Mentioned in the document. Option 1 is to establish a total mercury content above total mercury content threshold of, it is exactly 25 milligram per kilogram, and invite parties to consider establishing a national, local level of threshold between 1 and 25, and note that the waste under 1 milligram per kilogram shall not be regarded as category C waste. Option 2 is to just to request a group to further work on the threshold between 1 and 25 milligram per kilogram. So there was a question about why this is not under the technical document forum, and basically this is how the COP will decide between or something in between options 1 and 2, and this is not a purely technical clarification that can be solved by in the technical online technical document forum format, but this needs to be discussed at COP. So, but of course, as I said, the Secretariat would be happy to respond to any question. I think the next slide is a stop thing. So the COP may wish to resolve the remaining issues. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, it's a stop thing. It's a pause just to ensure that we have a moment to look into the virtual room to know that the rich documentation presented by ESACO on waste is clear enough, or if you have any questions on this matter, as you will have seen, much deep and detailed work has gone into the issue of thresholds, category A, B, and C. A and B is set, but C is still to be concluded on. And ESACO, as ESACO pointed out, two options of how to move forward are being presented. And this is for the COP to deliberate on. A draft decision is part of the document. And with that, let me just see if there's any specific question related to waste, other than the one posed earlier about the availability of that in the online document forum. But if Isaku spoke to that clearly, then I guess there is no specific question to waste. And therefore, with your permission, may I use the last minutes of our meeting today, the remaining 10 minutes, perhaps to give the floor also to some of my other colleagues, to give you some logistical details. I just want to confirm that, of course, the recordings of this session will also be made available. Please just give us a moment, a day or two, until we can upload everything. We shall be replying. It shall be uploaded in a day or two to the usual places that we have under Minamata online. We try to do these uploads as quick as possible, so it might even be there earlier. Just give us a moment to complete that. And if I may, just before I turn, there's one question, Isaku, maybe if I could just ask you just to speak to a question that actually was meant to have reached you during releases. There's a question about guidelines for new sources like gold plating. And perhaps you could just quickly clarify on that item, and then we go into logistical matters.
Thank you. So this is a very good question, important question. And firstly, the document refers to some literature on gold plating, I suppose. And also one thing is that there's further work going on to improve the inventory guidance. The UNEP inventory toolkit is a useful tool, but of course it doesn't cover all and every release source. So we are collecting specific information that could assist parties to develop and improve the inventories. Thank you.
Thank you. I found my unmute button. Thank you, Isaku. I also want to recognize that there was a follow-up question on reporting. I shall come back to it at the conclusion of the session. I just want to now hand over to my colleague Alex to take us to information related to registration. Over to you, Alex.
Good day to everyone. I will be very brief. So the registration for in-person segment of Minamata COP-4 was opened on 17th January and will be closed on 11th of February. All parties and accredited observers have been sent specific emails with unique link and attachment with instructions for online registration. You will see on the right side, this is a screenshot of the page that a delegate would land after accessing the link. You will have the possibility to edit your personal details. You can choose the mode of attendance and choose the role of the delegate, be it head or alternate head of delegation. Of course, I would like to start my further information with thanking all parties, observers, organizations who have already submitted their registration forms online and through emails. And also we would like to invite and encourage all parties and observers accredited to Minamata Convention further register their delegates for in-person participation, but also please note that there is also a possibility to attend the meeting online. To confirm that all registered delegates, regardless of their selected mode of attendance, will receive a connection details for viewing the plenary and the contact groups. Also, parties are invited to consider and inform the Secretariat if they foresee that it might not be possible for them to travel to Bali due to COVID-19 related travel restrictions. Please do so latest by 11th of February, so we have time to propose solutions for those parties. Once the registration window period will be closed, Secretariat together with Indonesia will evaluate the total number of pre-registered delegates and will send the confirmation emails to those delegates. Lastly, I would like to remind that developing countries parties and parties with the common economies in transition can request financial travel support for one delegate of their country. If you haven't received any information or invitation links, please contact us by the email indicated in this slide. Thank you very much, and happy to answer your question. Over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Alex. There is a question from Canada about pending accreditation. Perhaps you could already speak to that. There's something still pending as to when will the next process take place. Maybe you could speak to that. And also just there's another question, is the request for financial support to be submitted along with the formal nomination? If you can take both of those questions.
Yes. So pending accreditation, this is a term used in the system. So it's still pending the accreditation. As I mentioned, Secretariat would evaluate the total number, considering the total number of delegates. I forgot to mention that as agreed with Indonesia and as informed parties and all the observers, the limits, the agreed limits of participation would be 6 delegates per party and 2 delegates from observer country or organization. I hope I answered your question. And the second, yes, it would be very appreciated if you would indicate the delegate along with formal nomination. Yes. The support travel would be available only for parties. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah. And with the flight details, with other logistical details, we'll are working now with Indonesia and will provide everyone shortly in yeah, a couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. The questions were coming in and you were answering them in real time. And just to say, we saw the question yesterday about which airport to use. So please know that it is also on the top of our agenda and that of the host government. And we are just awaiting a formal communication on this. So if you could just wait for hopefully just one more day until we can be more clear on that matter. And there is a question on whether the pending accreditation means one cannot perhaps participate in the online budget forum, but I would just like to assure you that our colleagues are working rapidly on clearing and going into these accreditations so that the budget forum, which is set to open, I think, on the 4th, can be available to parties as soon as possible. With that, and only just a couple
Claudia.
of... Please.
Just to confirm that, as Eisako mentioned, it's enough to be nominated in the Kronos. So this is like a base for participate and yeah, follow the forums.
Yes, thank you, Alex. In other words, there's a slight difference between being able to access the forum versus the actual participation of delegates in Bali. We are just needing to look at both sets of accreditations. With that, I also see a question in terms of very specific items in terms of who is eligible for funding. It is, if you are wondering about your specific country, because some of those that are in OECD, though not all, may be in a different status, we shall reply to you directly. We just need to know exactly which party we need to advise. So I think it might be Mexico, so we'll come back to you directly. In terms of credentials, I will just ask my colleague Lara to very quickly speak to that. But credentials are important, of course, for parties. And yes, credentials will be both for online participation and for in-person participation. But Lara, if you could just use this time to draw attention to the issue of credentials, please.
Yes, thank you, Claudio. And you're correct to answer the question from the delegate, Francisco Barbieri. We are requiring all delegation lists to be reflected both in the nomination letter and in the credentials, regardless of the mode of participation, so in person and online. In general terms, you see on the slide the rules on credentials. The credentials must be signed by the head of state or government or by the Minister of Foreign Affairs. There are samples available on our website to draft credentials. The Bureau agreed for COP-4 to accept both originals as well as electronic copies of credentials. So please do share with us advanced copies in PDF, so that we can see and collect credentials in advance to the meeting. You see here the deadline of 6 p.m. on Monday, 21st of February. We strongly encourage you to send us your credentials by then to facilitate the clearance process, so that the Secretariat can review credentials and validate them in due time before the meeting. Those parties who have already submitted credentials for participation in both COP 4.1 and COP 4.2 do not need to resubmit credentials, but if there is a change in the delegation list, they will have to update their credentials and therefore send new credentials with an updated list of other delegates. And the latest deadline for submitting credentials is 24 hours after the opening of the COP. So this is the last deadline, after which we will not be able to consider any credentials for the preparation of the credentials report, which will be considered on Thursday by the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have basically run out of time for today, but I would like, with your indulgence, just to ask my colleague Richard just to present to you the side events slide, because this is a timeline that's rapidly approaching. So please, over to you, Richard, to speak on our pre-COP side events.
Thanks so much, Claudia. So the applications are still open for the COP 4.2 online side events for the week of March 7 to 11, 2022. We strongly encourage, the Secretariat strongly encourages parties to take advantage of this opportunity, as in-person side events at COP 4.2 will be very limited due to the health and conditions required on site. So again, please take advantage of the online side events, and the applications are still open. The deadline is on Friday, 11 February 2022. The guidelines in the application form can be found in the URL or link provided on, you see in the slide. And please submit the applications to the email addresses you see on the slide. That's it from my side. Back to you, Claudia, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And if I may ask my colleague Shariful just to go back to slide 2, just to look at what is coming up, where you will see all of the dates of the upcoming items as well. I had said the budget forum opens on the 4th, but of course it is actually on the 14th of February. The online budget forum opens. Also on the 14th of February, the online technical document opens. And until that time, we hope to be able to work through as many of the registrations and accreditations so that that you will be perfectly able as parties to participate in all of that. And as you can see here, is just that by the 11th of February, please to send us your registration details, to register as invited by the explanation from Alex. With that, I would like to close the briefing for today, but I would like to invite you to join us again tomorrow for the remainder of the documents, and we shall again build in a small logistics moment at the end of which, and also share with you any other information that we have until then. And again, we shall be making all these materials, that is slides and also the recordings available, but just bear with us that it might only be by the end of the week. Until then, let me just make one small comment, because I mentioned that I would come back to the question on national reporting. Just to say that if there is any incomplete matter in a received national report, we directly reach out to that country with a matrix of items that might not be completed. Sometimes this is minor, such as that a link doesn't work. Sometimes it's larger, that a question was perhaps omitted, and we would request that the question content be provided so that the report can be complete. So it really depends on what needs to be completed. What is important is the parties that have been able to do their reporting by the deadline, which was the 31st of December 2021. But there are still some parties that are completing their reporting now, and we shall absolutely try to do our best to support as many parties still to complete that. So if you are perhaps of a party that has not completed your reporting, you need anything else, please reach out to us in case we may be helpful in terms of getting any of the online credentials to go into our online reporting tool, or any other substantive item that you might need information on. With that, thank you very much on behalf of all of my colleagues and the entire Secretariat for your time and attention with us today, and we shall see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.